This is the strongest boss in Elden Ring, so I challenged all of you to beat him as fast as possible for $1,000. These speedrunners are absolutely insane, and the end of this video is so close that you will literally be on the edge of your seat. Before we begin, I'll be giving away $60 randomly to 3 of you who comment below your favorite thing about the DLC. I'll be responding to the winners over the next few days, and I'm really looking forward to reading your comments. Enjoy. Spicy is one of the most talented but unluckiest speedrunners to ever appear in one of my videos. In my Millennia challenge, he got the worst Millennia RNG ever, causing him to lose out on first place, but that was 2 years ago, and Spicy is determined to redeem himself. His philosophy when it comes to RNG is that it doesn't really matter if you're willing to grind out the runs. As a result, his hard work has not gone unnoticed, and he was even featured in this year's GDQ. Spicy's strategy is very conventional. After choosing the samurai and dying on purpose, he enters Limgrave and shows off some advanced movement, using the bow to cancel his hard fall and bunny hops to move faster on foot. He's gonna stop at Kale to buy some knives, and keep this in mind because they will come in handy later on. From there, he picks up Torrent from Melina, and now he can start making some progress towards his first goal. In order to access the DLC, each runner is going to have to beat Radahn and Moog, and the fastest way to do that is by progressing Vari's questline. This requires killing Magnus in Altus Plateau, and since quitouts were banned, this was extremely dangerous. On his way to collect the medallions, Spicy stops at this merchant to buy a bloody finger and a 3-month subscription to ExpressVPN. Wait, what? This video is sponsored by ExpressVPN. It is 2024 and you need to stay protected online. To put this in Elden Ring terms, similar to how you'd secure your online sessions with your friends by using a password, ExpressVPN protects you on the internet by hiding your traffic from real-life invaders like hackers, your ISP, George R.R. Martin, the list goes on. I find myself using ExpressVPN a lot when I'm away from home and my phone doesn't have any service. I'm usually forced to connect to a public Wi-Fi, which is really dangerous because any hacker on the same network can access your personal data, putting both your security and your privacy at risk. You can also use ExpressVPN to access content not available in your country. For example, on streaming services like Netflix, Disney Plus, and Prime Video, if I connect to a different country using ExpressVPN, then there's going to be way more films and TV shows that aren't usually displayed in my country. The best part about ExpressVPN is that you can get 3 months for free using my code AmazingChest and the link in the description. Thanks again to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. Nuclear Pasta Tom is a risk taker who isn't afraid to play the game the way he wants to play it. Being the only runner in the top 3 not to choose the samurai, Tom took a different approach instead, and it definitely paid off. He's gonna stop at this merchant to buy a finger too, but he does something bizarre and buys a smithing stone as well. We'll have to see what he has planned. He picks up the first half of the medallion before entering these ruins where he finds a chest that takes him to this tunnel. Tom's gonna scale this building to pick up a golden seed, and some impressive parkour lets him climb this tree. While Tom climbs up this tree, do me a favor and subscribe because I'm almost at 200k. After activating a nearby grace, he makes his way over to Fort Ferrith, where each runner finds the second half of the medallion and Radahn sword seal. At this point, Tom enters the round table hold, where he and the other runners purchase a weapon you probably weren't expecting. The battle axe. The battle axe is good for one thing, and you'll find out what that is when they get to Magnus. For now, he's going to use this waypoint in Liurnia to warp to these ruins, and exploring them rewards Tom with some rhymed crystal buds. Now that he has those, he's going to head east toward this pond and kill a scarab that drops Hoarfrost Stomp. This Ash of War was severely nerfed back when the game first came out, so whatever he has planned better be good. The final runner of this video is a dark horse. Alume is relatively unknown, at least as far as my challenges go, as he's never competed in a single one, but he definitely knows what he's doing. By combining the conventional nature of Spicy's run with the creative aspects of Tom's, Alume is able to pull off some strategies that no other runner had seen prior to his entry. While he does collect all the same items as Spicy, he's trailing behind by a little over a minute, getting held up by some extra items he picked up in Liurnia along the way. Right outside the Grand Lift is a Somber Smithing Stone 3, and now that they have both halves of the medallion, each runner can finally enter Altus Plateau. Once inside, Alume and Tom come across some root resin, and that'll allow them to craft freezing grease from the cookbook they picked up earlier. Near this caravan is some blood grease, and each runner will immediately use this in their fight against Magnus. Magnus is the first major reset point of this run, and everyone who competed has died to him at least once. The first step of this fight is to pray that Magnus doesn't two-hand his weapon, because if he does, then he'll just poise right through all of your attacks. Fortunately, he only one-hands it, which allows each runner to show off exactly why they picked up that battle axe. Thanks to the Wild Strike's Ash of War, Lume is able to lure Magnus into the corner, stun locking him so he can take full advantage of that blood grease. With Magnus down, they are each rewarded with the Great Star's Great Hammer, leaving only 2 obstacles left standing between them and the DLC. At low levels, Mohg and Radahn are formidable opponents, so each of the runners was going to have to get even stronger before they could take him on. The first step in doing so was finding a weapon, and Spicy and Illume both had the same one in mind. After defeating the Bloodhound Knight, they return to EG to bring their fangs up to +6. Spicy warps back to the Church of the Plague, where he intentionally dies, and his chat asks when he's hosting his $1,000 challenge.
When's the spicy bounty? I do not got it like that.
When he spawns back in, he has the option to revive at a nearby stake, which just so happens to be right outside of Radahn's arena. On the surface, this may appear to be a glitch, but this technique is allowed by the glitchless community, so it was also allowed in this challenge. When the fight starts, Spicy immediately runs backwards, causing Radahn to deload, and when he loads back in, he skips his arrow phase altogether. His fight begins with a big jump, and he's able to get off exactly 3 R1s as he stands directly underneath Radahn. Doing so will blind spot most of his attacks, and after a few more hits, he follows up with a Bloodhound's Finesse, shattering Radahn's poise and setting him up for a riposte. During the meteor attack, Spicy goes for one more weapon art, sealing the deal and bringing him one step closer to the DLC. After defeating Magnus, Tom heads back to the Round Table Hold instead, and remember those regular smithing stones from earlier? Well, he's going to use them here to upgrade Magnus's weapon to +4, and while he's at it, he puts Wild Strikes on it too. Tom's fight against Radahn is one for the books. Unlike the other guys, he actually does summon spirits in his fight, which isn't something speedrunners usually do. The reason why is because it increases the boss's HP, and it also makes the boss more unpredictable. Radahn is unique, however, because his summons are actually inside of the arena itself, and every boss's HP gets set when the host actually enters the fight. Knowing this, Tom's going to summon them anyway, and then he stacks the freezing grease from earlier with the built-in bleed of his weapon, using Wild Strikes to pull off an easy frostbite. The frostbite status reduces enemies' defenses by 20%, making the NPCs that much more effective. On top of that, Okina's Rivers of Blood inflicts fire damage, which is going to reset the frost timer on Radahn, allowing Tom to frostbite him again for a second burst of damage. All things considered, Radahn goes down in just 30 seconds, and by the end of this fight, Tom is leading by a full minute. Illume's fight goes just as well, but he's still currently in 3rd place. On his way to Mohg, he's going to stop by Vare to progress his questline, and that's when Vare tells him that if he wants an audience with Mohg, then he's going to have to soak Mohg's favor with the blood of a maiden. With that in mind, Illume warps back to this grace and decides to do the unthinkable. You see, there's a perfectly good maiden who's already dead at this church that you're supposed to get the blood from. But since that's a lot slower, these speedrunners are going to kill her instead, proving that they'll do anything for a time save. Bloody cloth in hand, Illume makes his way back over to the academy, headed south toward Vare, when the unexpected happens. Back at Vare, Spicy collects Mohg's favor and kills a nearby scarab for Bloodflame Blade. He's going to kill the exact same maiden as the other runners before heading back to where it all started and taking out the tree sentinel for the Golden Halberd. This will give Spicy access to Golden Vow, and at the current level he's at, he's going to need it if he wants to beat Mohg. That's when Spicy hands the favor over to Vare, who proceeds to break his finger, granting him access to the birthplace of our dynasty. While he's there, he's going to pick up a Lord Rune and then risk his life going for a somber Ancient Dragon smithing stone. This stone is so dangerous that Tom actually skips it all together, and Illume trades all of his runes to warp out safely after grabbing it for himself. Spicy wants to keep his runes though, so he's going to throw one of his knives at a nearby wall to distract the mob long enough to steal the stone and take the long way around the pillar to avoid dying. Spicy's fight against Mohg is a complete masterclass. He begins by activating Golden Vow and that rotten grease he found in Celia Crystal Tunnel. Although he's only level 37, the Rot and Bleed combination from his weapon is potent enough to wear Mohg down quickly, and before long, he's already in phase 2. Spicy has this fight down to a science. He skillfully rolls all of Mohg's attacks until he eventually scores a massive poise break. After dodging 2 more, he finishes off Mohg with a rolling R1. Before challenging Moog himself, Tom makes a quick detour to go level up and pick up the whetstone knife from outside of Stormvale. Heading east eventually brings him to a ravine where he's going to defeat this invader for his third and final weapon of the playthrough. His fight against Moog is intense, and it does a great job of showcasing Tom's versatility. When it starts, he's going to use the rock grease to imbue his weapon, and right away you can see how terrible his damage is. The reason for this is because Tom's invested all of his points into Arcane, which will ensure that he gets more bleeds, but only on his Reduvia since that scales with Arcane. It also won't impact his rot or frostbite buildup either, which is a common misconception. Once Moog is finally rotted, Tom switches over to the freezing grease so he can start getting some frostbites. After a stance break, Tom has the awareness to equip his Reduvia because it has a higher critical damage and better bleed buildup. Shortly after Moog transitions into phase 2, Tom finds himself stuck on a pot.
Oh my god, get off the...
He manages to keep his composure though, and after backing off for a little, Tom's gonna throw a dagger at Moog to keep his poise low. When Moog flies back down, Tom rolls the attack perfectly, and after dodging 2 more, the boss finally goes down. As impressive as that fight was, it's still 40 seconds behind Spicy, who's now leading the pack by a little over a minute. Now that they're all in the DLC, the only bosses required to challenge Miquella are Mesmer and Romina, but there is no way they can win in their current state. This means they'll have to collect Shadow Tree fragments, and each runner went about doing this in a slightly different way. When Tom and Illume enter the DLC, they make a stop at the Scorched Ruins to grab the fragment and the Blade of Mercy. This talisman is phenomenal for riposte, especially thrusting ones, since the first hit activates the 20% boost in time for the second hit to benefit from it, effectively making all riposte of this nature 20% stronger. After collecting his first fragment, Spicy heads west past the Golem where he finds another one, and crossing the bridge brings him to fragment number 3. Spicy's gonna spend a full minute navigating around this mountain where he finds the hidden spirit spring he'll use to avoid fighting R'hllana. Lume, on the other hand, had other plans in mind, and he reveals a strategy that no one else knew about. Rather than going all the way to Castle Ensis, Lume is just gonna scale right up this wall, utilizing a small rock on the mountain to access some unintended gravestones. While glitches were banned in this challenge, unintended parkour wasn't, so this is completely legal and saves Lume about a full minute. Climbing down the mountain leads to yet another fragment, and here we get to see some more crazy parkour. At the base of this mountain is the spirit spring from earlier, and one more jump brings him directly behind the castle. After leveling up and using their Shadow Tree fragments, Spicy and Illume kill a nearby scarab for a somber 8, and then they enter the Ruined Forge for a somber 7. Not too far from there is a pot enemy with a fragment who's guarded by a cursed blade who's hiding in the back. These enemies are very scary because they can kill you really quickly. In an attempt to handle this as fast as possible, Spicy just sends it, rushing in to kill the pot and jumping away briefly to avoid the cursed blade altogether. Tom and Illume, on the other hand, are a little more calculated, and they take the extra time to throw a knife at a nearby wall to distract the cursed blade first. At the 43-minute mark, Illume and Spicy are tied for second place, collecting a somber 9 before warping back to EG to bring their weapons up to +10. This brings Tom a full minute ahead, having saved a bunch of time because he didn't have to pick up any of those stones. He is perfectly content leaving his Great Stars at +4 and his Reduvia at +6. Halfway through the Sunken Stronghold is yet another fragment, and heading up this elevator eventually brings him to the Ancient Ruins. This place is massive, and it's very easy to spend a lot of time here. Fortunately, there are 2 shortcuts though, and the first requires you to jump off this cliff using this pillar to avoid dying on the way down. They're gonna kill another pot enemy for a Shadow Tree fragment and then line up the second shortcut of this area. This is a very specific jump into this tree, and landing it saves a lot of time. Pulling out the shortcuts results in a fragment for their efforts, and there's one more waiting for them at the altar before Romina. If you're having a hard time keeping up with all these fragments, then that's okay because so am I. Back in Shadowkeep, Tom picks up a very underrated item, and this will come into play in an upcoming boss fight. They're gonna stop by Hornson to progress his questline further, and doing so makes him available during the Mesmer fight. This is very important because winning with Hornson here ensures that he won't show up later on in perhaps the most unfair fight of the entire run. Outside of Mesmer's grace, each runner finally reaches level 7, and now that the fetch quest is finally over, the boss rush can now begin. Spicy starts off with a Blood Flame Blade, and after dodging Mesmer's opener, he makes a fatal mistake. Fortunately, that death was a quick one, so he doesn't really lose much time at all, and round 2 versus Mesmer was much better. Tom's fight versus Mesmer was interesting, and when it starts out, the first thing he does is summon Horn Scent. Just like versus Radahn, this is completely unheard of, and doing so is going to make Mesmer that much more unpredictable. There's a method to Tom's madness though, and his bleed does a great job of complementing Tom's build. Tom's having a much easier fight than Spicy, but Illume had one of the greatest Mesmer fights I have ever seen. When the fight starts, he dodges Mesmer's opener and responds with Bloodhound's finesse. He expertly rolls through all of Mesmer's attacks, and Illume is careful not to get greedy. His strategy is to stay up close while constantly circling to the left. You can see that Illume's practiced this fight a ton, and his hard work is really starting to pay off. Illume is in full control during this fight, and things only got crazier in phase 2. Unlike the others, when Mesmer transitions, Illume runs straight at him. His confidence here is absolutely insane, and he's going to space Mesmer's attack by simply walking away from the explosion. When Mesmer goes for his weapon art, Illume doesn't take one step back, holding his ground and landing a hit on Mesmer's toe. These are the optimizations that separate good runs from great ones, and Illume even gets a little bit lucky here when Mesmer doesn't go for the snake flurry that he usually does around 30%. One more riposte brings Mesmer to his knees, and while he's taking his last breath, Illume does something clever and summons Horn Scent so he can progress his quest line without the drawbacks of summoning him during the fight itself. With Mesmer down, Tom leads, and despite Spicy's deaths, he's now in second. Romina is his opportunity to change that. The fight starts, and Spicy's gonna roll through some attacks. He commits to a charged R2 and ends up trading with Romina. When she backs off, he's going to throw a knife to keep her poise low, and after a few well-placed rolls, he's going to get the stance break. As she enters phase 2, Spicy takes the time to rebuff, and when it's finally his turn to go back in, he gets really unlucky and she stalls again.
RNG is fucking terrible, holy shit.
You can tell his nerves are starting to get to him, and after landing a charged R2, he rolls just a little bit too early. Spicy holds it together though, and he enters the near Ilum at roughly 55 minutes and 56 seconds. Tom's Romina fight was the polar opposite of Spicy's, and without a plus 10 weapon, his damage was pitiful by comparison. His build is starting to come together though, and after a few more swings, we're able to see its full potential. The Hoarfrost Stomp that Tom grabbed early in the run gives his Great Stars massive frost buildup, and the Fire Coil from Shadow Keep is going to reset Romina's Frost Timer. This is a brilliant strategy, because out of all the main DLC bosses, Romina is the third weakest to Frost behind just Mesmer and the Shadow Tree Avatar. When Romina falls, Tom enters the DLC at 55:46, just 10 seconds ahead of Spicy, and Illume isn't too far behind either at 56:15. Near Ilum is the most dangerous part of this entire race, and it is notorious for its Divine Warriors, Gravebirds, and the infamous Leda fight. This danger is amplified by the fact that no runner was allowed to quit out, so any mistakes made here were most likely fatal. Tom begins his trek with some cognitive dissonance. He seems unsure of how he wants to spend his points, but ultimately he decides on Vigor.
I don't think I should have done this, but whatever.
He also switches his Great Stars back to Wild Strikes, and then he changes the time of day to night as well. The first Divine Warrior is going to stall him with his Feather attack, but Tom's able to slip by without a scratch. On the next staircase, he throws a knife at this railing and patiently waits for the warrior to investigate. The fact that it's nighttime reduces most enemies' vision, so this is going to make it a little easier for Tom to sneak by. On the third staircase, he backstabs the Spiral Mage, and this is where things start to get dicey. He tries throwing one more knife to distract the enemy guarding the door, and on his way up, things take a turn for the worst.
No, 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 no. Holy f... No, it's not easy yet.
Those extra points in Vigor were a good idea. On the following rooftop, he throws another knife, and this is going to distract the last Divine Warrior, who's arguably the worst one out of the entire bunch. If this guy catches you, then it's pretty much game over. Spicy and Illume's trip through a near Ilum couldn't have been any more different than Tom's. Rather than carefully luring away warriors with knives and sneaking around, they just ran through and it worked. Both runners are able to make it to the final staircase without much trouble, and going into the Leda fight, everyone is within 30 seconds of each other. Spicy and Illume are virtually tied. Leda is the most RNG heavy fight of the entire speedrun, but Tom had a plan to make things more consistent. Thanks to the fact that they defeated Mesmer with Hornsent, they won't have to worry about him much in this fight, and this is going to allow each runner to focus on Dane, who absolutely must die before Leda joins, or it's pretty much game over. For this reason, Tom decides to stun lock Dane with Wild Strikes, and once he's out of stamina, he switches over to the Reduvia.
Well, that was menacing. Yeah, that's fine. What the f... Oh, are you kidding? Kill me. You kidding me? How did he actually backstep that shit? How the...
Spicy's fight is going much better. The combination of Golden Vow, Blood Flame, and his +10 Fang really did a number on Dane. When Leda spawns in, Spicy stalls until Natan arrives, and the end of this fight is really close. One mistake causes Spicy to lose half of his HP, but he recovers nicely and Natan goes in for the save. Illume isn't very far behind, finishing his fight at 1 hour and 2 minutes, but Tom's death has definitely added over a minute to his time. It's still not over for Tom though, and if he gets a good enough Radahn time, then first place is going to him. Versus Radahn, Tom forgoes the Great Stars altogether, choosing to offhand a Buckler instead. Small shield parries have the most active frames out of all the different shields, and that'll allow Tom to parry on reaction rather than prediction. If he does make a mistake like he just did there, then that's okay because the Buckler parry in particular has a slightly faster recovery time. Radahn is choosing to fight him, which is the best case scenario. If your luck is bad, then Radahn can choose to go for one of the many attacks in his arsenal, which does nothing but waste your time. In phase 2 though, Radahn does exactly that, and after rolling a stomp, he takes to the skies.
Stalling move number 1.
Radahn wasn't done yet, and soon after he comes down, he goes for another one.
Stalling move number 2.
Tom makes it look easy, but these parry timings are very strict, and one mistake will cost you half of your life.
Did you just give that to me? You just gave that to me. Holy shit. What? Yes.
In the end, Tom's creativity rewards him with an amazing sub 108 time. Can Illume beat that? When I announced this challenge, the game was still new, and many runners didn't really know how to deal with Radahn yet. Illume was not one of those runners, and even though he was absent from every other challenge, right now, he has never been more present. When he lands, Illume gets another riposte, and one more attack brings him into phase 2. Illume's build is the perfect combination of Spicy and Tom's, bringing both power and versatility to the final fight. With his parry strategy, the Blade of Mercy really shines here, granting him 20% more damage for most of the fight. He gets a little unlucky here, and Radahn's going to waste his time further. Without even waiting for the attack to finish, Illume is already standing right in front of him, patiently waiting to parry his next attack. After one more, Radahn finally goes down, and Illume beats him in about 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 38 seconds. That fight was pure mastery, but if there's anyone in this race who can beat that time, it's Spicy. When Spicy enters phase 2, he only has 2 minutes to finish the fight. With a few hundred viewers watching his attempt live, let's see if Spicy can finally break his RNG curse and take home first place in one of my challenges.
That's it. That's it. I only lost a minute to him going in the air 4 times, but...
In the end, Illume took first place, and Spicy and Tom got second and third. This was a brutal challenge, but I want to thank everyone who took the time to participate. I think this race could have easily gone either way. If every runner knew about the shortcut by the Scorched Ruins, then things might have been different, but I think it really came down to their luck in the Letta and Radahn fights. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then you won't believe what happens at the end of this one.